Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for this special webinar session. I'm just going to give it a few minutes just to let everybody join the live as well. Now, the session is recorded. It's nothing to worry about. So if your internet does drop halfway through, we'll see if we can get a copy of the recording for you later as well. But my name's Kat, and I work in the international office. And I've got a colleague with me today as well.
Hi, I'm John Sturzaker. So I'm the Programme Leader for the MSc Sustainable Planning Programme.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. So we've got a brilliant session for you today, everybody. So this has been specially designed for you to prepare you for the course that you're going to be joining in Herts next year. Now, I'll just give you a bit of a guide to some of the buttons you can use in Zoom as well. So you should see on your screen, you've got the option to chat. You can use the chat to talk to each other as well. And then you've also got a Q&A button. If you do have any questions for me or John, use the Q&A just because sometimes the chat tends to move quite quickly and we don't want to miss them. But I'm going to take you through a great session today and then we'll answer some of your questions at the end as well. So John, I will pass to you now and you can take us through a little bit more about everybody's course.
Sure. Thank you very much, Kat. Yeah, so hi, everybody. As I said, I'm John Sturzaker and I work here at the University of Hertfordshire and I'm the Programme Leader for the MSc Sustainable Planning. So I'm going to share my screen and run through a little presentation, only a few slides. And what I want to do today is to, I might have shared the wrong screen there. I'm going to stop that and make sure I'm sharing the right one.
Yeah, it looks right. Thanks, John. Yeah,
it did look right. Good. Thanks, Kat. Yeah, I did do the right one. It just wasn't showing me at this end what I was sharing. Such are the perils of technology. So what I'm going to do is just, if I can move the slides on, do three things. Briefly tell you a little bit about the MSc Sustainable Planning. Obviously, you know about it already as applicants, but just a few sort of key facts. And then do what we call a taster session. So just give you a little bit of experience of the way we deliver content, you know, how you'll do things if you choose to come here and learn with us at the university. And at the end, we can have a question and answer session. As Kat said, put your questions in the chat, not in the chat, in the Q&A as she asked for, and then we can answer those at the end of the session. So it's going to be an interactive session. So in a few minutes, I'll ask you to go to something called Menti, menti.com, which is a website we use to interact with people. Because even if we're in a lecture theatre, not everybody wants to put their hand up and ask a question. So we use Menti to allow people to ask questions without needing to do that if they don't want to. So I'll let you know when the first opportunity for that arises in just a few minutes. So what does the MSc Sustainable Planning look like? So I'm just going to show you this slide with lots of coloured blobs all over it, which looks very complicated, but isn't in fact all that complicated. So what we have on the MSc Sustainable Planning is three pathways. One of them is just called Sustainable Planning. One of them is called Sustainable Planning and Environmental Management. And one of them is called Sustainable Planning and Transport. And you can see down the middle here, these coloured blobs, red, green and blue, are the pathway modules. So depending whether you're doing sustainable planning and environmental management, or sustainable planning and transport, you do one of those pairs of modules. And you also then, you would use that specialism in what we call the research programme, research methods, and then the dissertation at the end, which is a bigger blob. It's a bigger module. That's where you get to focus in on an area of your own particular interest and do a research project on that topic. And then over on the left-hand side here, the gold yellow coloured blobs are the core taught modules that everybody on the programmes do. And you can see there are various names. I'm not going to run through them all. The names really are fairly self-explanatory, so I'll just take one or two. So urban design and conservation is about urban design and conservation. So it's about the design of the built environment, how we plan for that, some of the issues we think about around that. And sustainable energy is about making energy production and consumption more sustainable, trying to reduce our carbon footprint and protect the environment from our activities. And you can see there are other different subjects that we cover across those taught modules throughout the around about a year of your study with us. We teach those in what we call a block short course format. So we do that over an intense 2 or 3 day period, followed by tutorials. So it might be a bit different to how you've studied before. I can answer any questions about the detail of that at the end, perhaps. So why do we think our program is right for you? Well, we've got a number of what we think are really important selling points. So there's very high employment rates from Masters in Sustainable Planning at the University of Hertfordshire and indeed elsewhere. So really high rates of employment, and graduates go on to work in a whole range of jobs all around the world, dealing with the sort of issues that we're facing today, whether it's climate change, thinking about transport, energy, housing, all the things you might think of when you think about planning. And that's partly because we have really strong industry connections on the programme. So we work with local authorities, the councils, the branches of the local government who are responsible for planning in England. We work with planning consultancies, private companies, some small, some large international companies like Arup, for example. We have a guest speaker from Arup who comes into one of the modules. And they come in and tell us about what it's like being a planner, but also tell us about what they're doing day to day and give you an insight into planning activity in their particular employer. And you can network with them there and through things like our Planning Employers Forum. You can also network through events organised by the Royal Town Planning Institute, the RTPI. So our programme is accredited by the RTPI, which means you get free student membership of the RTPI if you're on the MSc. And that's really good. It brings lots of benefits like access to all their web resources, support for becoming a planner, and you can attend events. So they put on lots of events locally and around the country. To support planners, bring them together so you can go and meet other young planners and more experienced planners as well, and understand how they made their way in the workplace. And then finally on here, we've got shared experiences. So we have the MSc Sustainable Planning and the pathways I mentioned. We also have an MSc in Transport Planning and an MSc in Environmental Management. And we share some modules with them, and you're all together in the same, what we call subject group. So that means you work alongside people from different programs, different backgrounds, and share your experiences with them. And you can imagine that that brings lots of different perspectives on the issues that we cover. So we think it's a great place to study. And here we are. This is everybody on our field trip from our comparative planning and transport practice module that we run in June. So this was everybody last year, well, earlier this year, 2024. That's us in Birmingham there. So we go and we look at another couple of other places within the UK. So this year we did Birmingham, and we went up to Glasgow in Scotland. And you can see this is right at the start of the trip. Everybody's happy, nobody's tired. But by the end, after we've walked around the cities and learned much more about them, everyone's had a great time. And it's often the thing that people really remember from their studies. So we hope to see you on that trip soon. So that's a very quick introduction to the programme, and as I say, I'm happy to answer more questions about the detail at the end. But I thought it might be helpful for you to see, just for a few minutes, how we go about learning about sustainable planning. So I want to share with you a few slides about a topic I'm particularly interested in, and that's green belts. So green belts are a planning policy which operates here in the UK and in many other parts of the world. And basically it's a belt of land that's designated to go around towns and cities and protect them from development. So limit the growth of cities. Essentially, that's what they are. And they are not very well known about by people in the UK. So what we've got here are some statistics from a survey done by the polling organisation Ipsos Mori back in 2015. And they wanted to find out what people knew about the green belt. So they asked them before this interview, how much if at all, did you know about green belt land? And you can see there, only 29% of people said they knew a great deal or a fair amount about it. Most people, 71%, said they knew either just a little, nothing, or never heard of the green belt. So not a large amount of understanding of the green belts, but interestingly, very high support for the green belt. So they'd said, what do you know about the green belt? Not very much, but do you think that in principle, existing greenbelt land in England should be retained and not built on. So should we keep the greenbelts as they are? And you can see there, 65% of people in this survey said that they strongly agreed or tended to agree with the principle that greenbelt land should be retained. So they don't really know what it is, but they want to keep it. That's the interesting thing about the greenbelt. So I'm going to now go to the thing I mentioned earlier, the Menti, just to see for the first of those questions how much you know about the greenbelt now. And then what I'll do, tell you a bit about it, and then at the end ask you the other question, which is whether you think they should be protected. So I'll stop sharing for a moment while I get this up. So if you can go to the website menti.com, thanks Kat for putting that in the chat, and enter the code. I'll just put the code also in the chat. Good point, Kat. I should have done that before. So go to menti.com and enter that 8-digit code that you can see in the chat there. You should, if I've got it set up correctly, see a screen which asks you, how much, if at all, do you know about the greenbelt in England? So I can share that again, and then you can see it. At the moment, we haven't got any responses, but that's okay. I'll take people a minute to, oh, there we go. So we've got one already. Thank you very much for that. So you can see at the top there, there's the code. Go to menti.com and type 7655 0002 in, and in fact, I think if I copy that, I can put that in the chat, and that might work as well. Let's try that.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. And yeah, everyone, this, don't worry about getting the answer wrong. This is just to give you an idea. So yeah, please do feel free to take part. It's all anonymous anyway. So yeah, don't worry. Just give you a taste of the tools that you'll see in your lectures.
Yeah, as Kat said, don't worry about this. There isn't a right or wrong answer, obviously, for this one. And as Kat said, we use this in lectures just to get people to join in and not ask people to put their hands up, because we sometimes find nobody wants to say anything. So that's great. Thanks, Kat. And I've put a link in the chat as well to everybody, so you can just click on the link, and that should also take you to the code. I'll give it another moment, and then I'll move on. Okay, so I think I'll leave it open, but I'll return to the PowerPoint so that we can proceed. Where are we? Here we go. So I'll move on to the next slide. So you can carry on putting comments in there, and I'll be able to see those at the end. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the history of the green belt. So it really evolved in England because of a concern about urban development. So England and the United Kingdom back in the 19th century was urbanizing very quickly. People were moving to the cities as part of the Industrial Revolution, and the conditions in the cities were very poor. Here's a photograph from a book by Professor Sir Peter Hall, showing a kind of typical urban environment, very high density, lots of families living in each of these little houses, and that down the middle would have been, a footpath and an open sewer as well. It was very, very unpleasant, very poor urban conditions, like we see in many parts of the world today, in fact. And prompted by this, a man called Ebenezer Howard published a book in 1898 called Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform. And he had the idea of what he called garden cities. So he talked about what he called the three magnets: the town magnet on the left of the diagram there, the country magnet on the right. So they're existing, pulling people in one direction or another, and both have strengths and weaknesses. And what he suggested was we needed a new magnet, the third magnet of town country, which would combine the best of the two. So with the beauty of nature and what he called social opportunity, so the ability to get out and earn money. So that was his idea: combine the best of the town and the country. And his famous book that we talk about more through the program has got lots of lovely diagrams in. Here's another one called The Social City. And this sort of yellowish color should be green. It's just not reproduced very well when I've copied it. So he basically had one of the first ideas for the green belt: big areas of green with settlements, the areas in pink, on top of those, and the belts around them, protecting and limiting the growth of cities. So that then developed through the 20th century, and we had the Greenbelt introduced as a planning policy, and we talk much more about that in one of your lectures. And this is where we are today. This is a map from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities from last year, showing the amount of Greenbelt that we have in England at the minute. You can see the green is the darker green area around the bigger urban areas. So here's London in the southeast, you've got Birmingham, and then you've got the Mersey, Manchester, Liverpool conurbation there, Yorkshire over here. So you can see around the biggest cities in the country, you've got the green belt limiting their growth. And currently it's about 13% of the land area of England is covered by the green belt. So quite a large proportion of the country is protected. And we've had green belts since the 1950s. So there's been some research looking at, well, how have they worked? What has happened to them? And these maps here are quite interesting. These are from somebody called Nick Green, who works at the University of Manchester. And what he's done is plotted how London might have expanded without the green belt. So the first few maps here show how London's actually grown from 1939, 1960, 1980, and 2000. So he produced these maps a few years ago. So that's how it's actually grown. So that's what it looked like then in 2000. And then he said, well, what might it look like without the green belt? So go back to 1939. That's what it might have looked like in 1960, 1980, and 2000. So compared to what has been done, what has been built, very much larger. He said London would have sprawled over a very much larger area, lots more development all around the countryside around it. So in that sense, the green belts have worked to limit development. But they've had some negative impacts as well. There might be, well, they've had some different positive and negative impacts. So they might have helped with health because urban sprawl, if you don't have green belts, can have negative social consequences in terms of health. There's lots of different opinions as to what they've done in terms of housing. So have they increased the prices of housing in England? They've led to what's called leapfrogging, where development leaps across the green belt and happens beyond it. And they've led to things like densification. So if you stop a city growing, what tends to happen is the urban density within it gets higher, and some things like urban green space is lost within it. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. They've had some benefits, they've had some disadvantages, but most people think what's happened is if you own a house, if you're wealthier, you've benefited more than if you don't. But they're still very popular. And they continue to command wide support, as we saw from that questionnaire at the beginning. But it looks like the levels of support are lower amongst younger people who perhaps don't have a house. This quote here from The Guardian said, private renters were a third less likely than people who owned their home to feel strongly about saving the green belt. So we come to the second Menti, my final slide. So can we go back to menti.com, if that's okay, and enter the same code again? And I'll put that into the chat as before. And we've got a different question this time, which is, to what extent do you agree or disagree in principle that Greenbelt should be retained and not built on? So I'll copy the link again and put that in there. Also, if you go to menti.com and put in the code or click on the link in the chat, they should both take you to the next question, which is just to see whether you think that the existing green belt should be retained and not built on. So thank you. One person's responded already. I'll share my screen again just for the last few minutes as we see the questions, the responses go in. So 2 people so far saying they agree. Thank you. We'll just do this for a minute or two and then we'll finish and come to the Q&A. 100% so far saying they strongly agree it should be retained, which is not dissimilar to the statistics I showed you back at the beginning. So most people in England think the same thing, that it should be retained and not built on. So 4 strongly agree and 1 agree. Thank you very much for your thoughts there. That's interesting. So what I'll do is I'll leave that open, I think, but I'll stop sharing. So you can carry on putting in your thoughts there, and I'll tell you at the end what the total is. But I think we can go to the Q&A at this point, if that's okay, Kat.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, John, as well. Lots of food for thought there. And again, I think I tend to agree. It's something that I feel like I don't know that enough about as I should. But yeah, I would want to keep it as well. So yeah, it's interesting seeing the panel on there.
It is.
But yeah, please do now, everyone, this is your chance to ask some questions to John about, you know, your course, if there's anything that you want to know. So please do use the Q&A for those. If you're struggling to use the Q&A function, then you can put it in the chat, because we've got a smaller group today. So that's fine. A question that I know usually comes up, John, just while we're waiting for some other questions to come through. The field trips that you mentioned as well, I know you said there's various cities, Birmingham, Glasgow. How do students get to the cities? Is it an organised trip? Is there additional costs they should be budgeting for this?
Good question. So we take you on the trip, so you don't have to get anywhere by yourselves for those. So there's that big trip, which is a whole module, and there in that instance we go on the train. So we pay for trains and accommodation. So those costs are covered in your fees. So there's no extra cost there. All we ask you to do while we're away is pay for, I think breakfast is included. So most people pay for evening meals, as you might do at home. So they're all included. And then we do other smaller trips throughout the course. We have a day trip to Letchworth, for instance, just down the road. And again, that's included. And we go there on a coach. So yeah, you wouldn't be, no one's expected to find their own way to somewhere a long way away, or indeed to pay for that. So it's all included.
Nice, that's good. Thank you.
I can see we've got a question in the Q&A. Sorry, Kat, I'm cutting across you. Do you want to
go for it? Yeah, absolutely.
So the question is, how much will a Bachelor of Architecture degree come to help us get along with this programme? Okay, really good question. We have people on the MSc with all different kinds of backgrounds. So we do have this year some people with bachelor's degrees in architecture, for example. Some people with engineering degrees, some with geography. I'm trying to think. Some with history. So really, any background is fine. We assume when people come on the course, they don't know very much about planning. So the fact that, for example, people don't know a lot about the Greenbelt is exactly what we expect. There's no problem with that. So whatever your background, we will get you up to speed. We work with you to carefully help you develop. So architecture is a great preparation. We do have an urban design module, and all of our modules probably have some relation to design, but you do not need any design skills to do the programme. So if architecture isn't your background, then that's equally fine.
That's brilliant, thank you. We've had another question in the chat this time as well. So I'm wondering if this is from maybe an enquirer who hasn't got an offer yet, but they've said, how much time does it take to complete the course?
And I can see somebody's put in a reply, a year. So yeah, that's right. Just if you're starting in January in our semester B, then it's slightly over a year for semester B starters. So the last thing you will do will be your dissertation, which you will submit by the end of the following January, possibly into February. So it's basically a year. That's the right answer. Thank you very much, Noman, for putting that in. It's a year for these are 1-year intensive master's programs that we offer here.
Brilliant, thank you. And another common question we get in the international office as well, if somebody is coming from a different background, is there any pre-reading that you would recommend they do, John, or any websites to read up on and get familiar with?
Sure. Another great question. So there's no pre-reading required because again, each module has its own reading list, so everything's a little bit different. And what I generally recommend is that people have a look, and you can look at the Royal Town Planning Institute website, RTPI, that I mentioned earlier on. That's rtpi.org.uk, and that tells you all about planning, and you can see there what planning involves and has jobs in planning and so on it. And then I'm just looking at my bookshelves to see if there's a book I'd recommend. I mean, they're all quite useful. There's one called Town and Country Planning in the UK, which can be helpful. Lots of guidance in there. We would recommend that when you start as part of the first module, but we've got it in the library here, so you will have access to it when you start. And again, absolutely no need to delve into that before anybody starts. We we work to get everybody up to speed from day one.
That's brilliant, thank you. We're almost at the end of the session. It was just a nice bite-sized session just to give you a taste of what's waiting for you when you do start Herts. Just a reminder to all our offer holders in the audience as well, if you haven't already paid your deposit, cleared all your conditions on your offer, now is the time to do so as well. The deposit deadline is coming up, so get that sent in, and you'll also, usually most of you will be eligible for the King's Award Scholarship, which is £2,000 off your tuition fees as well if you pay by the end of November. So that's well worth it. Then you've got the funds you can put towards your maintenance as well. Speaking of scholarships, I can see somebody's just put something in the chat as well, so I'll just quickly answer this and then we'll need to end the session. But somebody said they've got a background in urban and regional planning, want to confirm if we've got any scholarships or study loans. So yes, we do have the £2,000 King's Award Scholarship. It's on our website. We'll have also emailed you with the terms and conditions. But basically, if you're in the session today, you've got an offer, you should be eligible for that as long as you get your deposit in by a certain date as well. I don't know if you've got time to stay on for the extra question we've had, John, or if you've got another...
I can, yeah, I'm happy to stay on for a couple of minutes, if that's all right, if with everybody. So the question is, in which field can we perform well after completion of the degree from a future point of view? So, I mean, the course is particularly well suited to going on and working in planning. So town and regional planning, urban planning, rural planning, environmental planning. That's what it's focused on, and so that's where most of our graduates go on to work. But it also, because of the skills that we teach, so we're very focused on skills assessments, authentic assessments related to what people will do in all different workplaces, like presentations, report writing, group work. So they'll set you up for a skill in any kind of graduate job. Really, those are the things that employers will be looking for. So I think you well set up for specialising in planning, but good start in a number of other careers if you change your mind as you go through.
That's great. Yeah, some really flexible skills in there as well. And also we've got the careers team at Herts as well. They'll be around to support you. I think up to 4 years after graduation as well. So if you do kind of change your mind, like John says, want to look at different fields, you know, you've got their resource as well behind you. But yeah, any other final questions for John? Anyone? Put them in the Q&A or the chat just before we end the session.
That's while that's happening, I can tell you that of the people who've responded, 6 out of 7 strongly agreed to retain the Greenbelt, and one tend to agree. So one final question, recommend one book for early preparation. So the book I would recommend is called Town and Country Planning in the UK. I'll see if I can quickly find it on Google. I can put it in the chat.
Just while you're looking for that, there's a question that I can answer just popped in as well. So somebody said, after paying the initial deposit, how much fee is compulsory once they enroll at the university after landing in the UK? So your deposit, that's your minimum £5,000. That goes towards your tuition fees. And then usually shortly after registration, you'll have your first liability date deadline. Usually you need to pay about 65% of your tuition fees by this date. We'll have emailed them round to you. They're on the website as well. So there'll just be a small amount that you need to top up to hit that first liability date. And then your other fee liability dates, I think the next one after January will be in May, and then another one later in the year as well. So yeah, make sure you're keeping an eye on that. If you are in a position to pay your first year tuition fee in full by registration, you can also get a further £1,000 discount. So that'll be on top of your King's Award Scholarship. So if you're in a position to do that, it's well worth it, because it'll take a lot of money off your fees as well.
And there was also another question there. What's the demand of this field in the UK job market? So a great deal of demand. There's a big shortage of planners at the moment. We had the budget last week where the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced where they would be spending money, and she's committed to funding extra jobs in local government for planners because they really need them. Local authorities are struggling at the minute, so there's a really high demand for planners at the minute. It's I think it's the best time I can remember for getting a job. There are lots of jobs out there. If you search for planning jobs UK or words to that effect, you'll see loads of vacancies from graduate planner right up, obviously, to more senior roles once you've got more experience. So a really, really positive picture at the moment.
That's brilliant. Thank you, John. I think we've answered everything then. I know we were just planning a short session today, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on and giving up your time as well, John. It's been really helpful, I think, for everyone to get a chance to just get to know you a little bit as well and what to expect.
Yeah, it's been great. Very happy to help, and do get in touch with me if you've got any other questions in due course.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. If you do have any other questions as well about your application, you can email us at international@herts.ac.uk. You should have also received a separate message from John as well, just with a bit more info about the course that we've organised for you too. But yeah, reach out if you think of anything else that you would like to know on the run up to starting with us in January, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thank you.